Good morning, students. Myself Abhishek Sharma from Mount Litra Z School Jhansi. Students, today we are continuing fourth chapter of class 12th Indian Economic Development. The name of chapter I have already mentioned on my whiteboard is poverty. In my previous lecture, we have discussed about poverty. What is poverty? Who are poor? Poor in urban areas, poor in rural area, and some features of poor, that is hunger, poor health, limited economic opportunities, debt trap, lack of facility for electricity and water, gender inequality, and bigger families. Now, today we are going to take one of the two important terms related to this topic, that is relative poverty and absolute poverty. The problem of poverty can be overcome only when poor people are identified properly. For this extent, poverty needs to be worked out. So what is relative poverty and what is absolute poverty? We will describe them, their meaning, example along with their importance and limitations. So starting with relative poverty. Relative poverty refers to poverty of people in comparison to other people, regions or nation. Meaning, relative poverty refers to the poverty of people in comparing to other people, regions or nations. Example, if Ram has lower income in comparison to Shyam, then we can say that Ram is relatively poor. Now, what are the importance and significance of relative poverty? It helps in understanding the relative position of different segments of the population. Limitations. What are its demerits? It only reflects the relative position of different segments of the population in the income hierarchy. It does not consider how poor the poor person is. This means it cannot tell the depth of the poverty of poor. So it is right how poor the poor person is, or whether he is deprived of the basic minimum requirement of life or not. The basic minimum requirement means food, clothes and shelter. Are he or she is deprived of these basic minimum requirement for life? Yes or no? So we cannot find this by relative poverty. Now what is absolute poverty? Meaning, absolute poverty refers to the total number of people living below poverty line. Now what is the example for understanding this concept? According to the absolute measure, around 23.6% of India's population is below poverty line, or we can say that around 1/4 total population of India comes under BPL. BPL means below poverty line. So it is the best example to tell about what is absolute poverty. Again, it refers to the total number of people living below poverty line. You are not comparing. You are simply saying in numeric terms that certain number of people living below the poverty line. Now what is the importance of absolute poverty? The concept of absolute poverty is relevant for less developed countries like India. Why? Because there is abundance of poverty. It helps to measure the number of poor people in underdeveloped countries or the countries which are developing. Now, what are the limitations or drawbacks of absolute poverty? So, the method of poverty line used to measure absolute poverty does not differentiate between the very poor and other poor. This means poverty line fails to distinguish exactly between the person who is very poor and the person who is poor. Moreover, it does not consider other social factors that are also responsible poverty. Poverty is not only generated in terms of money, but there are other certain social factors that generates and they are responsible poverty, like illiteracy, ill health, lack of access to resources, discrimination or lack of civil and political freedom. Once again I repeat, illiteracy, ill health, lack of access to resources, discrimination, or lack of civil and political freedom. So that's all for today. Thank you and have a nice day.